On today's episode of Star Wars Factions Compared, we take a look at Airspeeders. Hey guys, this is EckhartsLadder. Hello and welcome to another episode of Star Wars Factions Compared. Today we will be comparing the Airspeeders of the Rebel Alliance, New Republic, Confederacy of Independent Systems, and Galactic Republic in order to determine which one is best. A shout out to everyone on the Discord who voted for today's video. If you'd like to have a voice and help decide future content, make sure you join the EckhartsLadder Discord at discord.gg/EckhartsLadder. Alright, so on to today's content, and as I said, we're looking at Airspeeders. For those who don't know, an Airspeeder is a craft which can operate in atmosphere, but not in space. X-Wings, for example, are not Airspeeders, they're starfighters. They can operate both in space and in atmosphere. Even something like a TIE Striker, which is optimized for atmospheric combat, will not count because it is space capable. You guys may have also noticed that I didn't include the Empire in this video. That's not because they don't have Airspeeders, but rather because there are other factions, namely the New Republic, which have more notable variants. Let's get started with a look at the Clone Wars era Republic and the PTB 625 planetary bomber. Although at first glance the PTB looks basically like an atmospheric version of the ARC 170, the speeder is much different than its INCOM starfighter cousin. Unfortunately, we only have one picture of the vessel from a Star Wars RPG guide, so it's hard to get a real sense of scale, but if you look closely, you can see that this thing is actually huge. Those two areas that look like little windows on the front and the back of the craft are actually full-sized gunner turrets. I have a few relevant quotes from the Stay on Target expansion for Fantasy Flight's Age of Rebellion role-playing game, which actually, funny enough, features this craft on its front cover. It says the PTB is a massive flying wing style airspeeder driven by 6 powerful ion turbofan thrusters mounted in the trailing edge of the wing/fuselage. Optimized for strategic bombing missions, the PTB 625 has a cavernous modular ventral mounted bomb bay that can carry any kind of ordnance from standard proton or concussion bombs to sophisticated rotary launchers designed to launch heavy missiles from beyond visual range. Although the PTB is slower than its space-going siblings, even today it is faster than most heavy airspeeders of similar type and role. This thing is a behemoth, akin to a 1930s style flying fortress, something I don't think I appreciated when I talked about it in my previous airspeeder video. That brings with it advantages and disadvantages. It's primarily a very effective heavy bomber, with enough weaponry on board to take down even extremely fortified facilities and bases. The question really is whether such a vehicle is necessary or even useful. I can see it mostly as a large target, especially to other speeders or starfighters which still carry a good amount of firepower but are nowhere near as slow or as bulky. When the guide talks about its fast relative speed, it means in reference to other ships of its size. It continues saying, while certainly a powerful and capable airspeeder, the PTB is considered antiquated in modern orders of battle, its role overtaken by multi-role speeders and small, fast, dedicated strike fighters, saying later that it does have limited usefulness but is still brought out by the Rebel Alliance when a heavy bomber is needed. Aside from the bomb launch bay, it has several forward and rear facing laser cannons as well as auto turrets. Based on the RPG guide, the bomber does not appear to have a shield, but I cannot confirm that for certain. Let's move now to the Confederacy of Independent Systems and their Hmp Droid Gunship. I actually didn't realize that the Hmp was a speeder. In the Clone Wars, we see some of them flying in space. However, it appears that there are two variants, one that's space capable and one that's not. Obviously, for this episode, we're going to look at the atmospheric version. Although the Hmp is technically a transport vehicle, it mostly brings droids into battle, and the transport facilities are very compact. It's still totally covered by weapons and armor, and actually has a dedicated shield, which is rare for speeders. Weapon-wise, it has 2 rotating turrets near the droid's head, which is capable of tracking targets independently. Alongside that, it also has a chin-mounted laser cannon, light wing-mounted cannons, and dozens of interchangeable missiles on each wing. Based on what we see in the Clone Wars, it appears that the Hmp actually has a fairly substantial reserve of these missiles. We also see in the Clone Wars that the ship is very fast, but probably not as maneuverable as a dedicated strike speeder, like the ones we'll talk about later. The Incredible Cross Sections book says the Hmp can move thousands thousands of kilometers per hour. However, that book is notorious for over-exaggerating numbers. However, it is true that ships in Star Wars, when covered by a deflector shield, seem to move substantially faster. We should talk a little bit about the droid gunship's ability to transport things. It can take not only droids into battle, but with some modification, light assets like tanks. That being said, its versatility and usefulness here is somewhat limited by its inability to carry troops. Obviously, the fact that it's a droid does carry additional considerations. There's nothing to suggest that the HMP has a sophisticated droid mind like a droid tri-fighter, but on the other hand, given how valuable the vehicle is, I think its programming is probably more advanced than that found in droid starfighters. Still not as useful as a very skilled organic pilot, but with top-of-the-line reaction speeds. Let's now move to the New Republic and look at the V-Wing Speeder. The V-Wing is an incredibly fast and light ship introduced by the New Republic sometime after the Battle of Endor. It's one of the fastest ships on this list, perhaps only second to the HMP when using its deflector shield, but it's certainly more maneuverable. Its combat effectiveness is increased even further through the use of the scramjet booster. It is, however, fairly light. It has double blaster cannons on each one of its wings, but that's about it. In Rogue Squadron for the N64, the Speeder also has lock-on cluster missiles, but apparently these are not a canon part of the ship design. The V-Wing also possesses no shield and isn't particularly well armored. Again, the focus with the V-Wing is on speed, getting to a target quickly, dispatching it, and hopefully not taking any damage. It's really a fairly good and of course cheap speeder, but I wouldn't really favor it against most modern, shielded, well-armed starfighters. Let's now move to the Rebel Alliance and take a look at the most famous speeder in Star Wars history, the T-47. The snowspeeder used at the Battle of Hoth was but one variant of the T-47. The speeder was highly customizable and could be changed to fit different environments or tactical situations. The armor of the T-47 was often modified depending on the mission type. If they wanted a really fast craft, armor would be taken off, and of course if you wanted a little bit more protection like on Hoth, you would add extra armor. Regardless of the configuration, the T-47 was fast and maneuverable, but I don't think it could compare in any of those areas with the V-Wing, a purpose-built military aircraft. Its weaponry was also lacking, with only a couple fairly low-powered laser cannons. The configurability and whatnot is really nice, but I don't think there's any getting past the fact that the T-47 was designed by Incom to be an industrial vehicle, not a military one. I think that puts it a little bit behind the 8-ball when compared to the other ships on the list. I do, however, like the fact that it has a dedicated gunner who fires even the front-facing weapons, which allows the pilot, I think, to focus more on actually flying. With that out of the way, let us rank these speeders from worst to best. Some of you will have watched my previous top 5 airspeeders video, and I have to say I've really changed some of my thinking since then, particularly regarding the quality of the T-47 when compared to other airspeeders. Speaking of, I think the Rebel Alliance has the worst speeder. I think it's telling that only at the Battle of Hoth, one of the Alliance's most desperate moments, do we see these speeders in action. They're fast and maneuverable, but they don't really pack any sort of punch. If they could add a missile launcher to the bottom, for example, they'd be much more effective vehicle. It seems to me that the V-Wing does everything the T-47 does, but much better. Speaking of, when looking at number 3, we have to decide whether we like a planetary bomber or a strike speeder more. I think the RPG guide we looked at earlier does a fairly succinct job of explaining that large aircraft like the PTB are fairly outdated and only useful in very niche situations. For that reason, I'm going to give the PTB 625 Heavy Planetary Bomber the number 3 spot, though I think there's a strong argument that you could make for it and the Republic being number 2. I really like how large it is. I like that it brings a lot of weaponry to battle, but it just seems like too much of a target. At number 2, we have the New Republic and their V-Wing Airspeeder. The V-Wing also has some issues. I like the focus on speed and maneuverability, but I do think it's chronically underarmed, even for a ship in its role. I think the Rogue Squadron variant, where the V-Wing also has a cluster missile launcher, makes a lot more sense and would really propel the craft to the next level. However, it still works as a cheap, easily deployable airspeeder, and I think it fits more situations than the PTB, which is why it gets the number 2 spot. That leaves the #1 spot to the Confederacy of Independent Systems and the Hmp Droid Gunship, which I also said previously was the best transport of the 4 major factions. The Hmp is compact, it's fast, it's well armored, it's shielded, and it carries a lot of weaponry with it. Those quick-fired missiles, I think, are particularly devastating. There's not a lot I would change about the Hmp. I don't think it could keep up with T-47 and certainly not the V-Wing in a straight dogfight, but it's still an incredibly effective craft, which is why, for me at least, it gets the #1 spot. That, however, is of course just my opinion. Down in the comments section, let me know if you liked this video, if there were any airspeeders that I left off this list that you would have liked to see compared, and of course any ideas you have for future episodes. As always, girls and boys, this has been EckhartsLadder. Thank you for watching. Until next time, may the force be with you.